The suburb of Aurora, Colorado, does not look like a battlefield at 4 o'clock hours. It looks like a dormant circuit board, a grid of silence and sodium streetlights humming against the cold dark of the high plains. At this hour, the human biological clock is at its absolute nadir. Body temperature drops, reaction times slow to a glacial crawl, and the mind is buried deep in REM sleep. This is the calculated window of vulnerability. The tactical team moving up the driveway of the split-level house on Elm Street knows this. They are not moving with the chaotic urgency of a police raid from a decade ago. There are no sirens wailing in the distance, no flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the neighbors' windows. The operation has evolved beyond shock and awe into something far more terrifying: industrial silence. The 7 men in the stack were the slate-gray uniforms of federal enforcement, a color chosen specifically to blend into the pre-dawn shadows. They move with the rhythmic, practiced fluidity of a machine that has done this 1,000 times before. In the past, an operation like this would have required a warrant signed by a judge based on human intelligence, a tip from a neighbor, a traffic stop, a disgruntled employer. That was analog enforcement, prone to error and delay. Tonight, the target sleeping inside was not flagged by a detective. He was identified 48 hours ago by a predictive algorithm running in a server farm in Northern Virginia. The code, known internally as Enhanced Leads Identification and Targeting for Enforcement, or ELITE, didn't find a crime. It found a data trail. It cross-referenced a utility bill in Denver, a geolocated cell phone signal pinging from a construction site in Lone Tree, and a series of remittance payments sent to El Salvador. The software calculated a probability score of 99.8% unauthorized status and automatically printed the work order. At the front door, the lead agent doesn't pound on the wood. He checks a handheld device, a smartphone running an app called Mobile Fortify. He holds it up to the smart doorbell camera, testing the facial recognition capabilities even before the breach. The device chirps a silent haptic feedback, confirming the target is inside. The breach itself is kinetic but controlled. A hydraulic ram pops the lock with a dull thud, not a splintering crash. The air in the house changes instantly, sucked out by the sudden intrusion of the state. The team flows into the hallway like pressurized water. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3. There's no screaming. Screaming requires oxygen and the cognitive processing time to understand that your reality has just fractured. The target is awake, but he is frozen, his brain struggling to reconcile the safety of his bed with the sudden presence of armored men in his bedroom. By the time his adrenaline spikes, his wrists are already secured with high-tensile zip ties. The agents do not yell commands. They speak in low, flat tones that cut through the panic. They're not angry. They're working. This is a job site. The lead agent scans the target's face with the Mobile Fortify app, bypassing the need for a driver's license or a confession. The app pulls data from state DMVs, federal immigration files, and even social media scrapers. A green checkmark appears on the screen. Match confirmed. Package secure. He has walked out of his home in his pajamas. He is not placed into a patrol car. He is guided down the block to a vehicle that looks like a municipal maintenance truck or a generic shuttle bus. It is an unmarked transport unit with blacked-out windows. The engine has been idling the entire time, a low diesel rumble that blends into the background noise of the city. He is placed in seat number 14. The bus has 20 seats. The algorithm that routed this pickup has already optimized the path to fill the remaining 6 seats before the sun comes up. This is the efficiency of the new era. It is not law enforcement in the traditional sense. It is supply chain management applied to human beings. The man in seat 14 is no longer a father, a worker, or a neighbor. He is inventory, and the inventory must be moved before the city wakes up. To understand the sheer scale of Operation Aurora, you have to look past the political rhetoric and stare directly into the logistics. Politics is noise. Logistics is the signal. We're talking about the physical extraction and relocation of 11 million human beings. This is not a policy proposal. It is an engineering challenge that rivals the mobilization for World War II. 11 million people is not a crowd. It is the entire population of Greece. It is the population of Ohio. To move the entire state of Ohio across a border, you do not need a law. You need an industrial infrastructure that currently does not exist. Let's look at the transportation mathematics. To move this volume of people by air, you would need approximately 40,000 commercial flights. If you commandeered every single seat on a Boeing 737 and flew it out of the country every hour on the hour, 24 hours a day, it would take you 5 years to clear the backlog. And that assumes the destination countries will allow the planes to land. Most won't. This reality forces the logistics onto the ground. It requires a fleet of 200,000 buses, moving in constant convoys from the interior of the United States to the southern border. It requires a fuel supply chain, a maintenance schedule, and a driver corps larger than the entire employee base of Greyhound. But transportation is the secondary problem. The primary problem is warehousing. You cannot catch and deport 11 million people in a day. The legal processing, even under the Expedited Alien Enemies Act of 1798, creates a bottleneck. This lag time creates the need for the holding pen. The current capacity of ICE detention centers is roughly 40,000 beds. To execute Operation Aurora, the government needs a capacity of over 1 million beds available immediately. This explains the sudden, quiet acquisition of 23 massive industrial warehouses across the Midwest and Texas in early 2026. These are not jails. They are fulfillment centers for people. The hub-and-spoke model is being deployed. Local enforcement teams, the spokes, bring detainees to regional processing centers like the retrofitted auto parts factory in Kansas City or the abandoned aircraft hangars outside of El Paso. These facilities are designed for high-density containment. They're stripped of privacy. They are lit by high-pressure sodium lights that hum 24 hours a day, erasing the concept of night and day. Inside, the National Guard has been mobilized, not as soldiers protecting the homeland, but as logistics officers managing the flow of biomass. Their weapon is not the rifle. It is the clipboard and the barcode scanner. Then there is the cost. The financial brutality of the operation is staggering. According to the American Immigration Council, the cost to apprehend, detain, process, and deport a single individual averages around $19,000 when you factor in the new infrastructure. Multiply that by 11 million. The total price tag exceeds $315 billion for a one-time operation. If spread over a decade, the cost balloons to nearly $1 trillion. That is $967.9 billion of taxpayer money. To put that in perspective, that is more than the GDP of Saudi Arabia. It is 3 times the annual budget of the United States Army. Where does that money go? It flows into the deportation industrial complex. It goes to the private prison companies like Geo Group and Core Civic, whose stock prices have tripled since the announcement of the operation. It goes to the airline charter services that fly the IC Air routes. It goes to the construction firms pouring concrete for the new tent cities in the desert. Operation Aurora is not just a national security initiative. It is the largest stimulus package for the security state in American history. It is a gold rush born from a demographic crisis. The math is cold, detached, and relentless. It does not account for the economic crater left behind, the $1.7 trillion lost in GDP, the collapse of the agriculture and construction sectors, or the inflation spike that will hit when the labor force vanishes. The math only cares about throughput. The system is designed to maximize the number of bodies moving from point A to point B. The backlog is the enemy. The human being is just the widget passing through the machine. And right now, the machine is starving for inventory. The breach at 4 a.m. is merely the kinetic termination of a process that began months earlier in the silent, air-conditioned server rooms of Northern Virginia. To understand how a single individual is identified within a population of 330 million, one must understand the digital dragnet. This is not an investigation led by human detectives following clues. It is a data harvesting operation that relies on the total erosion of the concept of privacy. The primary weapon in this theater is not a gun, but a piece of software called Mobile Fortify. This application, currently deployed on the smartphones of every field agent, allows for real-time biometric scanning that bypasses the need for physical identification documents. But Mobile Fortify is just the user interface. The backend is a labyrinth of commercial data brokers and federal interoperability. The methodology is terrifyingly simple: surveillance capitalism repurposed for state enforcement. The Department of Homeland Security does not need to wiretap your phone. They simply purchase your location history from third-party data brokers who harvest it from weather apps, flashlight apps, and casual mobile games. They use tools like Locate X by Babel Street, which allows an analyst to draw a digital geofence around a specific location, say, a construction site known for hiring day labor, and retroactively identify every device that has entered that zone in the last 6 months. The algorithm then tracks those devices back to their dwelling points at night. If 20 devices consistently travel from a job site to a single-family home zone for 4 residents, the system flags an occupancy anomaly. This creates a reality where the undocumented are hunted not by their actions, but by their metadata. The digital dragnet ingests utility records, looking for spikes in water usage that indicate overcrowding. It scans remittance data from Western Union and MoneyGram, flagging recurring payments to specific zip codes in Honduras or Guatemala. It scrapes social media using SocialNet by Shadow Dragon, building relationship graphs that link a target to their entire extended family based on who liked a Facebook photo in 2019. The result is a target package generated without a single human witness. The implication for the average citizen is the complete dissolution of anonymity. To catch the 11 million, the surveillance apparatus must ingest the data of everyone. When you drive through a toll booth, your license plate is scanned and stored in a database accessible to ICE. When you walk past a smart doorbell in the suburbs, your face is digitized and cross-referenced. You're part of the same dataset. The only difference is the flag attached to your file. For the citizen, the algorithm ignores the data surplus. For the target, the data surplus is a death sentence. The dragnet does not filter, it accumulates. In the eyes of a server, we are all just rows of data waiting to be queried. Once the acquisition phase is complete, the logistical challenge shifts from hunting to warehousing. The sheer volume of human biomass involved in Operation Aurora defies the capacity of the existing federal prison system. There are roughly 40,000 detention beds available in the United States. The operation requires 1 million. To bridge this gap, the government has turned to the hub-and-spoke logistics model, repurposing massive industrial infrastructure into what are euphemistically called processing centers. These are not jails in the architectural sense. They are holding pens. We are seeing the rapid conversion of abandoned big-box retail stores, defunct aircraft hangars, and massive auto parts factories in a high-density containment zones. The aesthetic is brutalist and purely functional. The interior of a converted Walmart in Texas, now designated Sector 4, is a cavernous space stripped of all humanity. The floor is polished concrete. The lighting is high-pressure sodium, casting a sickly yellow pallor over the thousands of cots arranged in grid patterns. These lights never turn off. They hum at a frequency that induces low-grade nausea and sleep deprivation, a calculated design choice to keep the population docile and disoriented. The architecture of control here is based on chain-link fencing. There are no solid walls between the pods, only steel mesh that allows sound to travel unimpeded. The acoustic environment is a deafening roar of thousands of people coughing, whispering, crying, and shuffling. It is the sound of systemic shock. Privacy is non-existent. Sanitation is communal and industrialized. Rows of portable chemical toilets and shower trailers parked on the loading docks. The air smells of unwashed bodies, industrial disinfectant, and the metallic tang of fear. To manage this facility, the department has mobilized a National Guard, but their role has shifted from military defense to inventory management. They're joined by private contractors from companies like Geo Group and Core Civic, whose stock prices have quadrupled since the contracts were signed. These contractors operate the facility like an Amazon fulfillment center. Every detainee is issued a wristband with a QR code. They are scanned to receive their daily calorie ration, a prepackaged MR meal ready to eat. They are scanned for medical triage, which is limited to preventing immediate death or contagion. They are scanned for the flight manifest. This is the industrialization of misery. The holding pen is designed to be temporary, a waypoint between the life they built and the plane that will take them away. But as the transportation bottlenecks tighten, as countries refuse to accept flights and buses run out of fuel, the temporary becomes indefinite. The warehouse fills up, the temperature rises, the tension breaks, and the logistics officers on the catwalks, looking down at the sea of humanity, realize they are not guarding a prison. They are guarding a pressure cooker that has been welded shut. The bottleneck of the holding pen is only cleared by the air bridge. This is the kinetic phase of removal, operated by a shadow airline that appears on no civilian departure board. Known internally as ICE Air Operations, headquartered in Mesa, Arizona, it is a fleet that rivals many mid-sized national carriers. But unlike Delta or United, its passengers do not carry boarding passes, and they do not get to choose their seats. The fleet consists of leased Boeing 737s and McDonnell Douglas MD-80s, stripping the concept of travel down to its barest mechanical function, displacement. The interior of an ICE air flight is a study in high-altitude containment. The passenger experience is defined by the RAP, a full-body restraint system used for non-compliant detainees, and the standard-issue 5-point shackle setup. Wrist to waist, waist to ankles. There is no in-flight service. There are no overhead bins. The cabin temperature is kept deliberately cold, a tactic known as environmental pacification, designed to keep the human cargo sedentary and lethargic. A typical flight might carry 135 detainees and 12 specialized aviation security officers who are authorized to use tasers at 30,000 feet. But the commercial charters are not enough for the volume required by Operation Aurora. To meet the throughput targets, the Department of Defense has activated the Civil Reserve Air Fleet protocols, deploying massive C-17 Globemaster military transports. These are war machines, not airliners. A single C-17 flight from El Paso to Guatemala City cost the taxpayer approximately $250,000, roughly $3,000 per seat. The acoustics inside a C-17 are deafening. There is no insulation, just the roar of 4 turbofan engines and the rattle of chains against the cargo deck. The flight patterns are relentless. The daily scheduled large aircraft, DEATS-LA, routes form a spiderweb across the hemisphere. A plane leaves Alexandria, Louisiana, at 0200. It stops in Brownsville to refuel and load more inventory. It touches down in San Pedro Sula, Honduras, at 0900, offloads its cargo on a remote tarmac surrounded by razor wire, and is airborne again by 1000. It is a conveyor belt in the sky. The pilots do not speak to the passengers. The ground crews do not make eye contact. It is a silent, sanitized loop of extraction that turns human beings into logistical units, delivered to countries they may not have seen in 20 years, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The air bridge works perfectly until it hits the diplomatic wall. This is the crisis that the algorithm cannot solve. You can put people on a plane, but you cannot force a sovereign nation to let that plane land. There is a specific designation for countries that refuse to take back their own citizens, recalcitrant. This is the red list. It includes geopolitical adversaries like Venezuela, Cuba, China, and Iran. When a detainee from a red list country reaches the front of the line, the system errors out. The Venezuelan government simply denies flight clearance. The airspace is closed. The pilot cannot land. This creates a logistical dead end. The detainee cannot be deported But under the new indefinite detention protocols of Operation Aurora, they cannot be released. They become ghost prisoners, stuck in a permanent loop of warehousing with no exit vector. To break this deadlock, the State Department has weaponized the visa system. It is called Section 243D sanctions. The threat is blunt. Take your deportees back, or we stop issuing visas to your diplomats, your business leaders, and your students. It is diplomatic blackmail. We are seeing a suspension of visa processing for 75 countries, a maneuver designed to inflict maximum pain on the elites of refusing nations. But for the hardest targets, the regimes that do not care about visas, the U.S. has adopted a darker solution: third country transfer. If Caracas won't take them, we send them to a safe third country that has been paid to accept them. We are effectively renting sovereignty. Flights destined for China are being diverted to remote airfields in Ghana or Rwanda, where the U.S. government pays a hosting fee per head. The deportee steps off the plane expecting Beijing and finds themselves in West Africa, stateless, penniless, and thousands of miles from any home they ever knew. This is the final stage of the logic. If you cannot be returned, you will simply be displaced. The goal is not repatriation. The goal is removal. Anywhere but here. The true cost of Operation Aurora is not found in the budget of the Department of Homeland Security. It is found in the sudden, deafening silence of the American economy. When you remove 11 million people, you are not just removing unauthorized residents. You are surgically excising 5% of the total workforce and nearly 15% of the manual labor pool. The result is an immediate, catastrophic supply shock that economists call the hollow economy. The first casualty is agriculture. In the Central Valley of California, the impact is visible from satellite imagery. Thousands of acres of lettuce, strawberries, and almonds are turning brown and rotting in the furrow. These crops require human hands to harvest. Machines cannot pick a strawberry without crushing it. With the labor force deported or hiding in basements, the harvest simply stops. The food supply chain begins to fracture within 48 hours. The price of fresh produce in urban centers spikes by 400%. A head of iceberg lettuce becomes a luxury item. This is the Aurora tax, the inflation caused by the sudden vanish of the hands that feed the country. The contagion spreads to construction. In Miami, Phoenix, and Las Vegas, the cranes stop moving. The framing crews, the teams that build the skeletons of houses, are gone. The roofing crews are gone. A project that was scheduled to take 6 months now has a timeline of 3 years. The cost of home repairs skyrockets. A leaky roof becomes a structural crisis because there is no one to fix it for less than $500 an hour. The housing market freezes, not because of interest rates, but because the physical capacity to build has been deported. But the deepest horror is in the hospitality and care sectors. The ghost shift, the night shift that cleans the office towers, washes the dishes in the Michelin-star restaurants, and changes the bedpans in the nursing homes, disappears overnight. Sanitation standards collapse. Restaurants close half their sections. Nursing homes are forced to sedate patients because they lack the staff to monitor them. The economy does not just slow down, it grinds metal on metal. The multiplier effect kicks in. For every agricultural worker deported, 3 jobs in trucking, processing, and retail are wiped out. The GDP contracts by 2.6% in the first quarter, a self-inflicted depression generated entirely by the logistics of removal. As the digital dragnet tightens, the remaining target population does the only thing it can do to survive. It goes dark. We are witnessing the birth of the analog underground, a parallel society that exists completely outside the digital spectrum. To survive Operation Aurora, you must become a ghost. You must delete the data shadow. The smartphone is the first thing to go. It is a tracking beacon. Millions of people revert to burner culture, disposable flip phones bought with cash, used for 3 days, and then destroyed. Communication shifts from WhatsApp and Facebook to dead drops and face-to-face whispers. The digital silence is deafening to the NSA algorithms. The chatter stops, but the people are still there. They move into Faraday spaces, basements lined with copper mesh or simple foil to block cellular signals. They stop driving cars with license plates. They stop using credit cards. The cash economy explodes, becoming the only way to buy food or rent shelter without triggering a database flag. This creates a new illicit industry: identity leasing. American citizens, desperate for cash in the crashing economy, begin renting out their digital identities. They lease their bank accounts, their driver's licenses, and their social security numbers to the undocumented for a monthly fee. A clean skin can rent their identity to 3 or 4 different families. The algorithm gets confused. It sees one person buying groceries in 3 different cities simultaneously. This is data camouflage. But the state responds by criminalizing the network. The Department of Justice invokes the harboring statutes of the Immigration and Nationality Act. The definition of smuggler is expanded to include anyone who provides shelter, transport, or financial aid to an undocumented person. The grandmother renting out her basement, she is now a felon. The priest allowing a family to sleep in the church vestry, he is a trafficker. The surveillance apparatus turns inward, monitoring citizens to see who is buying too much food, who is withdrawing too much cash, and whose electricity usage doesn't match their household size. The hunt for the undocumented becomes a hunt for their sympathizers. Trust evaporates. Neighbors watch neighbors. The fear is no longer just about deportation. It is about being accused of being part of the underground. The society fractures into those who hide, those who hunt, and those who are terrified of being caught in the middle. To hunt a target that has gone analog, the state must physicalize the digital dragnet. It must bring the border inward. Legally, the border zone extends 100 miles from any external boundary, a jurisdiction that encompasses 2/3 of the American population, including cities like New York, Chicago, and Houston. Under Operation Aurora, this legal technicality has been weaponized into a total suspension of the Fourth Amendment for the majority of the country. The border is no longer a line on a map. It is an omnipresent, rolling condition of life. The infrastructure of the highway system has been transformed. We are seeing the deployment of tactical checkpoints on major interstates far from Mexico or Canada. These are not the sleepy stops of the past. They are militarized choke points equipped with vehicle and cargo inspection systems, VACHIs, gamma-ray scanners that can see through the steel hull of a semi-truck at 60 miles per hour. Traffic is throttled. Every driver is a suspect until proven otherwise. The commute to work now involves a biometric verification stop. The freedom of movement, a core tenet of American liberty, has been replaced by permission to proceed. This is the papers, please reality, updated for the 21st century. You don't show a passport, you scan your eyes. The Sentinel kiosks, originally designed for airport entry, are now bolted onto toll booths and freeway on-ramps. They scan the iris and the fingerprint in seconds. If you are a citizen, the light turns green and the gate lifts. If you are unmatched, or if you are flagged as a harborer, the gate locks and the tactical team swarms. The psychological impact on the citizen population is profound. You're constantly reminded that your right to travel is a privilege granted by the database. The internal passport is no longer a physical booklet. It is your biometric compliance. We see the rise of avoidance routing, apps like Waze, but modified by the underground to flag active checkpoints. But the algorithm fights back, moving the checkpoints randomly, turning the interstate system into a game of cat and mouse. The country feels smaller. The open road is gone. We are all living in the waiting room of a security terminal. When you deport 11 million people, you trigger the largest involuntary transfer of wealth in modern history. These people did not just exist in a vacuum. They owned things. They had 30-year mortgages on starter homes in the suburbs. They had car loans on Ford F-150s. They had small businesses, landscaping trucks, restaurant equipment, inventory. When the bus leaves at 4 a.m., these assets do not go with them. They are left behind, frozen in time. This triggers the Great Liquidation. It begins with the vehicles. Millions of cars are abandoned in driveways, impound lots, and airport parking structures. The banks hold the notes, but there is no one to pay them. The repo market collapses under the sheer volume of inventory. We see auction cities springing up, massive lots where trucks, sedans, and vans are sold for pennies on the dollar to speculators who ship them overseas or strip them for parts. The used car market crashes, destroying the equity of every American who owns a vehicle. Then comes the real estate crisis, the Aurora foreclosures. Entire neighborhoods in Houston, Los Angeles, and Chicago go dark. The payments stop. The banks move to foreclose, but the courts are gridlocked. The houses sit empty. Lawns go uncut. Windows get broken. Squatters move in. The value of adjacent properties, owned by citizens, plummets by 40% because they are now living next to ghost homes. But the true predators are the vulture funds. Private equity firms raise billions to buy these distressed assets in bulk. They are buying the American dream of the deported class at fire sale prices. A landscaping business that took 20 years to build is sold for the cost of its lawnmowers. A family restaurant is liquidated for the price of its ovens. This is the economic looting of a demographic. The wealth accumulated by the undocumented over decades is not transferred to their families. It is absorbed by the financial sector. The deportee lands in their country of origin with nothing. The bank in New York writes off the bad debt and sells the asset for a profit. It is a vacuum cleaner sucking the accumulated capital of the working poor directly into the ledgers of Wall Street. The neighborhood is empty, but the balance sheet is full. The economic devastation of Operation Aurora is not contained within the borders of the United States. It travels south at the speed of a wire transfer, or rather, the sudden absence of one. For decades, the economies of El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and large swathes of Mexico have been kept on life support by a single financial lifeline: remittances. This is the money sent home by workers in the U.S. to feed their families, build homes, and start businesses in their villages. In some of these nations, remittances account for 25% of the entire GDP. They are more valuable than their exports. They are more stable than foreign aid. When the deportations begin en masse, that lifeline is severed. The Western Union terminals in rural Guatemala go silent. The remittance shock hits these fragile economies like a tactical nuclear weapon. Construction projects in San Salvador stop because the funding from a brother in Virginia has dried up. Families who relied on that monthly $300 to buy food suddenly find themselves destitute. The ripple effect is catastrophic currency devaluation. The local currencies crash because the influx of dollars has evaporated. This triggers a cruel irony, the paradox of enforcement. By deporting the breadwinners to stabilize the U.S., Operation Aurora destabilizes the entire Central American region. Governments in the region face immediate insolvency. They cannot pay their police. They cannot pave their roads. The social safety net, already thin, dissolves completely. The very conditions that caused the migration in the first place, poverty, violence, instability, are exacerbated by the return of the deportees. You are sending millions of desperate, penniless people back to countries that have just lost their primary source of income. It is not a repatriation. It is a recipe for revolution. The region catches fire, and the smoke drifts north. If Operation Aurora is a nightmare for the migrant, it is the greatest business opportunity in history for the cartels. The logistics of mass deportation create a massive surplus of vulnerable human beings dropped directly into the cartel's territory. When an ICE air flight lands in a border town, or a bus convoy unloads at a crossing point, it is delivering fresh inventory to organized crime. The deportation drop-off becomes a hunting ground. The Sinaloa and Jalisco new generation cartels have already pivoted their business models. They're moving away from drugs and toward human extortion. A deportee stepping off a bus in Nuevo Laredo is instantly spotted by cartel lookouts. They're kidnapped within the hour. The phone call is made to the family members who remain in the U.S., the wife who didn't get caught, or the uncle who has citizenship. We have him. $5,000 for his release, or you never see him again. This is the kidnapping industrial complex. The deportation policy effectively feeds the cartels a steady stream of hostages, monetizing the misery of the displaced. But the profit center isn't just kidnapping. It's the boomerang trade. The vast majority of those deported have deep ties to the U.S. They have children in American schools. They have lives they cannot abandon. They will try to return immediately. But now, the border is harder to cross. The price of passage skyrockets. 5 years ago, a coyote might charge $3,000. Now, with the heightened security and the desperation of the deportees, the price is $15,000 or $20,000. The cartels have monopolized the crossing points. Operation Aurora has inadvertently created a captive market with inelastic demand. The harder the U.S. government makes it to cross, the more the cartels can charge. They're using the profits to buy military-grade drones, corrupted officials, and heavier weaponry. By trying to secure the border through mass removal, the operation has supercharged the enemy on the other side. The border zone becomes a militarized conflict zone where the line between smuggler and paramilitary force disappears completely. The deportees are caught in the crossfire, ground between the gears of the American state and the Mexican criminal empire. The logistics of Operation Aurora are impossible without the absolute consolidation of political power. The machine requires a driver. In the Oval Office, the strategy shifts from rhetoric to the raw application of executive authority. It begins with the signing of a document that has been gathering dust since the administration of John Adams, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. By invoking this specific wartime statute, the president bypasses the slow, grinding machinery of the immigration courts. The due process bottleneck is shattered. Under this act, a migrant is no longer a defendant with a right to an attorney. They are subject of a foreign power, removable at the pleasure of the executive. The pen stroke is silent, but the shockwave breaks the judiciary. But the real war is domestic. It is the war between the White House and the sanctuary cities. The mayors of New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles refuse to cooperate. They order their police departments not to assist ICE. In the past, this was a stalemate. Under the new administration, it is an act of rebellion. The president responds with the federal funding kill switch. The Department of Justice issues an ultimatum. Any municipality that refuses to share biometric data with federal enforcement will have all federal funding stripped immediately. We're talking about billions of dollars for highways, schools, and hospitals. It is fiscal strangulation. A city like New York can hold out for a month. But when the subway maintenance funds run dry and the hospital grants evaporate, the political will fractures. Then comes the federalization option. When the governor of Illinois refuses to deploy the National Guard to assist in the roundups, the president invokes the Insurrection Act. He nationalizes the Illinois Guard, taking command away from the governor and placing it directly under the authority of the Pentagon. The soldiers who were neighbors yesterday are now federal enforcement assets today. This is the moment the constitutional crisis moves from the courtroom to the street. Tanks with federal markings rolling through American cities, not to fight an invader, but to enforce the will of the White House against the local government. The message is clear. There is no sanctuary. There is only the state. A machine this complex cannot function if the gears resist. The greatest obstacle to Operation Aurora is not the activist in the street. It is the bureaucrat in the office. The deep state, the career employees of the DOJ, DHS, and the Pentagon are the friction. They drag their feet. They leak memos. They cite regulations. To execute the mass deportation, the administration initiates Schedule F. This is the reclassification of 50,000 civil servants. Overnight, career employees with job protections are stripped of their tenure and reclassified as political appointees. This means they can be fired at will. The email goes out on a Monday morning. Do you support the president's agenda? If the answer is hesitated, or if the employee has a history of donation to the opposition, they're escorted out of the building. We witness the great purge of the federal government. The experts in logistics, human rights, and legal compliance are removed. They are replaced by vetted loyalists. These are not experts in immigration law. They are experts in obedience. They are young, ideological, and committed solely to the throughput metrics of the operation. This removes the internal brakes. When an order comes down to divert money from the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund to build more detention camps, the new loyalist at the Office of Management and Budget stamps it approved without blinking. When the order comes to ignore a court injunction, the new Attorney General drafts the justification in an hour. The government becomes a streamlined weapon. The institutional memory is wiped. The checks and balances are dismantled. What remains is a direct transmission line from the president's desk to the agent in the field. There is no one left in the room to say no. The moral hazard is removed, replaced by the singular objective of the mission. The bureaucracy, once a slow-moving beast of deliberation, is now a predator that moves with the speed of a single man's will. If the detention centers are the warehouses of Operation Aurora, the immigration courts are the choke points. By early 2026, the backlog of pending asylum cases had breached 4 million. In the old world, a detainee was entitled to a hearing. They were entitled to stand before a judge, present evidence, and make a case for fear of persecution. This process took an average of 3 years. The administration viewed this timeline not as a legal necessity, but as a national security vulnerability. The solution came from the Department of Justice in the form of Operation Rocket Docket. This is the industrialization of judgment. The physical courtroom is gone. It has been replaced by adjudication pods, windowless rooms in federal buildings in Falls Church, Virginia, and Fort Worth, Texas. Inside, there is no judge on a bench. There is a screen. We are witnessing the deployment of mass video hearings. A single judge sits in a remote office, staring at a monitor split into 50 quadrants. 50 detainees, sitting in 50 different holding pens across the country, appear simultaneously. They are not individuals. They are a batch. The judge does not ask for their names. He asks for their alien registration number. The hearings are conducted in blocks. The judge reads a collective rights advisory to the group. Do you understand? 50 heads nod in a laggy, pixelated silence. Motion to remove is granted. The entire process takes 11 minutes. But the true innovation is the algo clerk. To speed up the drafting of decisions, the DOJ has deployed large language models trained on immigration statute. The AI reads the initial intake form, determines the probability of a successful asylum claim, which is set to near zero by new executive guidelines, and instantly drafts the order of removal. The human judge simply clicks sign. This is the rubber stamp scaled to the level of an assembly line. The legal defense industry has collapsed. There are not enough lawyers in the Western Hemisphere to represent the volume of people being processed. The right to counsel technically exists, but if your hearing is scheduled for 4 a.m. tomorrow and you are in a tent in the Arizona desert, that right is a fiction. The courtroom has become a slaughterhouse for due process. It is efficient, it is fast, and it is completely deaf. The only sound is the clicking of the judge's mouse, finalizing the exile of 1,000 people before lunch. Federal resources are finite. There are only 20,000 ICE agents. Even with the National Guard, they cannot police every street corner in America. To achieve the total removal mandate, the administration needs a force multiplier. They need the local cop. This brings us to the expansion of Section 287G. Historically, this was a voluntary program where local sheriffs could partner with IC. Under the new executive order, it is no longer a partnership. It is a deputization. The White House issues a directive. Every police officer in a compliant jurisdiction is now a de facto federal immigration agent. The thin blue line is erased. The officer who pulls you over for a broken taillight is no longer just checking your registration. He is running your biometrics against the Aurora database. If you flag, the traffic stop becomes a federal apprehension. This creates this silence of the cities. In immigrant-heavy neighborhoods, places like East Los Angeles, Queens, and Houston, the population goes dark. They stop calling 911. If a woman is beaten by her husband, she does not call the police because the police will deport her. If a shopkeeper is robbed, he does not report it because the report requires an ID he doesn't have. Crime does not go down, reporting goes down. We see the rise of predator zones. Criminal gangs realize they can operate with impunity in these neighborhoods because the victims are terrified of the state. You can rob, assault, and extort without fear of a police report. The police have transformed from protectors of the peace into hunters of the populace. But the executive order goes further. It includes a qualified immunity clause for any officer acting under 287G authority. If a local deputy raids the wrong house or uses excessive force during an immigration arrest, they're shielded from federal civil rights lawsuits. This empowers the rogue sheriff. In rural counties, sheriffs organize volunteer posses, armed citizens deputized to assist in maintaining order. We see roadblocks set up by civilians in tactical gear, checking the papers of their neighbors. The state has not just mobilized the military, it has mobilized the worst instincts of the citizenry. Trust is the first casualty of a police state. When you cannot trust the man in the uniform, you cannot trust the system. And when you cannot trust the system, the society begins to fragment into tribes. The hunter and the hunted. And in Operation Aurora, everyone is watching to see which list they are on. By the third month of Operation Aurora, the Cold War between the White House and the sanctuary cities turns kinetic. The president, frustrated by the refusal of local mayors to hand over their databases, escalates the conflict from legal maneuvering to physical siege warfare. The Department of Justice declares New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles zones of noncompliance. This is not just rhetoric. It is a legal designation that triggers the deployment of BORTAC, the Border Patrol Tactical Unit. These are the special forces of the immigration apparatus, typically reserved for high-risk cartels in the desert. Now, they're deployed to Queens. The tactic is saturation. Since the NYPD refuses to hold detainees for ICE, federal agents simply flood the streets. They set up perimeter checks around subway stations in immigrant-heavy neighborhoods like Jackson Heights and Sunset Park. They park unmarked vans outside of public schools. They conduct visible deterrence patrols in full tactical gear, carrying long guns in broad daylight. The message is psychological terror. If your city won't give you up, we will come and take you. The cities fight back, but their weapons are bureaucratic. City garbage trucks accidentally block the driveways of ICE field offices. Fire inspectors shut down federal holding facilities for code violations. It is a game of cat and mouse played by government agencies against one another. But the federal government holds the ultimate trump card, the purse. The White House follows through on the threat to freeze federal transit grants. The subway system in New York begins to crumble as maintenance funds evaporate. The potholes in Chicago go unfilled. The garbage piles up in Los Angeles. The president goes on television and offers a simple trade. Hand over the 50,000 flag targets, and the money comes back. The population turns. The sanctuary ideal collapses under the weight of a failing infrastructure. We see that turnover riots. Citizens, angry about the degradation of their city, begin to demand that the mayor comply. The solidarity fractures. The mayor of New York capitulates at 3 a.m. on a Sunday. The data pipes are opened. The NYPD is ordered to stand down. And in the vacuum, the BORTAC teams move in. The raid that follows is the largest single police action in the history of the city. Block by block, the zone of noncompliance is scrubbed clean. As the deportation flights hit the diplomatic wall of the red list countries, the holding pens described in Chapter 4 begin to evolve. They stop being temporary processing centers and start becoming permanent cities. We are witnessing the application of the Guantanamo model to the American interior. There are now 200,000 people in the system who cannot be deported because their home countries, Venezuela, China, Iran, refuse to take them. But under the new Alien Enemies protocols, they cannot be released. They enter the realm of indefinite administrative detention. The tent cities in the Texas desert are replaced by rigid structures. Hardening the target. Concrete is poured. Watchtowers are elevated. The perimeter fence is doubled and electrified. These are no longer camps. They're penal colonies. Inside, a new economy emerges. The camp dollar. With no hope of release, the detainees are put to work. The administration invokes the voluntary work program clause, paying detainees $1 a day to maintain the very prison that holds them. They cook the food. They sew the uniforms. They repair the fences. It is a closed-loop system of labor that costs the private contractors almost nothing. We see the rise of the stateless generation. Children are born inside the camps. Under the new interpretation of the 14th Amendment being pushed by the DOJ, these children are denied birthright citizenship. They are born without a country. They exist in a legal limbo, growing up behind razor wire, educated by tablets running state-approved curriculum, with no memory of the outside world. The horror of the Guantanamo model is not the brutality, it is the permanence. The camp becomes a fixture of the American landscape, as normal as a shopping mall or a football stadium. Drivers on the highway pass the miles of fencing and guard towers and don't even look over. The presence of a permanent underclass of indefinite prisoners becomes background noise. The temporary emergency has become the forever condition, and the contractor collecting $150 per head per day lobbies Congress to ensure that the red list never opens and the planes never leave. The profit is not in the deportation. The profit is in the retention. By the end of the first year, Operation Aurora has achieved something the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century could only dream of: the self-policing society. The state no longer needs to hunt for every target because the citizens are doing it for them. This is the bounty protocol. To clear the final backlog of the underground, the administration launches a federal rewards program. See something, say something is monetized. A verified tip leading to an apprehension pays $1,500. It is an economic stimulus for the desperate. In a hollowed-out economy where inflation is rampant and jobs are scarce, turning a neighbor becomes a survival strategy. We see the collapse of social trust. The whisper networks that once protected the undocumented are poisoned from the inside. Landlords turn in tenants to clear units for higher-paying clients. Disgruntled employees turn in co-workers. Ex-spouses weaponize the hotline to settle custody battles. The culture of the country shifts. The good citizen is defined not by contribution, but by compliance. The Aurora app climbs to the top of the App Store. It gamifies the purge. Users get points for tips. They get badges for protecting the community. But the horror is that the definition of target begins to drift. First, it was the criminal. Then it was the undocumented. Now, it is the sympathizer. The algorithm begins to flag citizens who have too many connections to the deported. If you transferred money to a deportee, you're flagged. If you visited a detention center, you are flagged. The circle of suspicion widens until it encompasses anyone who dissents. This is the soft totalitarianism of the database. You aren't arrested. You are just debanked. Your credit score drops. Your passport renewal is pending indefinitely. You're not put in a camp. You are simply locked out of the operating system of American life. The silence in the streets is not just the absence of the deported. It is the silence of the remaining citizens, terrified that their own phone is listening for a whisper of treason. We have reached the end of the operation. The buses have stopped running because there is no one left to fill them. The detention camps are quiet, transitioning into their secondary role as permanent federal prisons for political dissidents. The administration declares mission accomplished. A banner is unfurled. The president gives a speech from the balcony of the White House, declaring the borders secure and the nation purified. But let's look at the final ledger. The cost was not just $1 trillion in taxpayer money. The cost was the soul of the republic. The agriculture sector has collapsed, replaced by corporate megafarms running on automated tractors that cost millions, wiping out the family farm forever. The construction industry is dead. New housing starts are at zero. The inflation rate is stuck at 12% because the labor supply shock is permanent. But the biggest line item on the ledger is the precedent. We built a machine capable of rounding up 11 million people. We built the camps. We built the surveillance dragnet. We suspended the Fourth Amendment. We weaponized the judiciary. That machine does not go away just because the operation is over. It sits there, waiting for a new target, Who is next? Is it the political opposition? Is it a religious minority? Is it you? The infrastructure of tyranny is indifferent to who feeds it. It only cares that it is fed. We started this documentary by asking how you move 11 million people. The answer is, you don't. You move the line of what it means to be human. And once you move that line, you can never move it back. The Aurora has passed, but the night it brought with it is just beginning. Stop. Do not disconnect yet. The analysis you just heard is the sanitized version. It is the story the history books might write if we are lucky. But there is a darker timeline. There are executive orders already drafted that go beyond deportation. There are plans for denaturalization, stripping citizenship from naturalized Americans. There are plans for the digital dollar, a currency that can be turned off if you dissent. We have found the files. This is the Crimson Files. We are the only channel investigating the timeline they don't want you to see. We are tracking the glitches in the simulation. We are documenting the silence. If you want to survive the transition, you need the raw data. You need to know what happens when the red light stops pulsing. Click the subscribe button. Turn on notifications. This is not a request. This is a survival instruction. Subscribe to Crimson Files. Welcome to the Resistance.